Okay, let's talk about talking. Not talking in real life, talking in movies, otherwise known as dialogue.
Yes, I could sing in an acapella group, but
This video is going to give you 10 tips on how to master dialogue. And in the end, we'll discover why dialogue is such a powerful tool in storytelling and how it can do one thing that not plot or character or anything else can do to move the story forward. Tip number 1. It's not the sound, it's what's being said. Now, here's the thing. One of the reasons why it's so hard for writers to figure out how to write great dialogue is there's just not a lot of great information out there. One of the tips you're going to get over and over and over, and I don't blame people for saying this because it's somewhat true. Listen to people talk. This is a bad idea. Why is it a bad idea? Because dialogue is not speaking. Dialogue is not talk. Dialogue is a construction. So you go and listen to people talk. Are you going to get a lot of great information? No. You're going to hear them talk about the newest episode of their favorite television show. You're going to hear them talk about the game or politics or whatever. Now, sure, you could get some great dialogue if you were to eavesdrop. Maybe hide in the closet on the night that your sister asked her husband for a divorce. You'd get some good dialogue there. But in general, you're just going to hear people talk. The other reason why it's a bad idea to focus on how people talk and the sound of it is it's a red herring. It's going to lead you off the path. It's not really about the sound. Here, let me show you some pages from some arguably great screenplays. Look at that. Is there anything so miraculous about the sound of it? Not really. It's not about the sound. It's what's being said. This is from the screenplay written by Jon Favreau for Swingers. We have here a pickup scene. Now, we've seen the scene a million times, and Favreau and the director Doug Liman found a way to do this in a way that had never been done before. Now, let's say we were to just pull from the ether and focus on the way we're sounding. And we tried to write this scene. It might come out something like this. Hey, do you come here often? Screw off, guy. I don't want to talk to you. I'm trying to drink. Right. That's basically what would happen to me anytime I hit on a girl in a bar. But in this case, what they do is they find a way to make it really unique and specific to the character. And listen to what they say here.
I figure I worked for it. Why not?
I know where it is. Starbucks. I served you an espresso at Starbucks.
Espresso. An espresso. Yes, that's my drink. That's probably it. That's great. Isn't that funny?
You came in and asked me for an application, and then I took you and introduced you to my manager.
See, it's a pickup scene, but it's one we've never seen before. And this leads me to tip number 2. Good dialogue is specific to the character. Specificity is key. Right, when he talks about himself, he says, I work at the ha-ha hole. I have a booking agent, right? These are specific little details that give you an idea that the world around the movie is happening even when the movie is not on, right? It makes the characters feel real. This is connected to Hemingway's iceberg theory. Basically, Hemingway said, if you show your reader everything, then they're going to realize how thin and small of a construction your story really is, because that's all it is. It is a construction. These people aren't real. But if you just show them the iceberg tip, they're going to imagine the whole world underneath it. So we never see the ha-ha hole. We never see his booking agent. We just hear of them. And because there's specific little details are given, we believe that it's real, that it's full, and that there's a life beyond the story. Let's jump over to Pulp Fiction, right? Okay, 2 guys walking to work, shooting the shit. They just happen to be hitmen. In a badly written screenplay, they would say he touched the boss's wife, and so he killed him. But it's not just the guy. It's Tony Rocky Horror. He's Samoan. And he didn't just kill him. He threw him off a building. Now he talks with a speech impediment, right? All these little tiny details make the world feel rich, and they're specific. They're specific to these people in this time. And it's all faked. I mean, who knows if there's hundreds of pages of character biographies for Tony Rocky Horror. I mean, maybe there is, but I doubt it. Whether there is or not, Tarantino knows that you can fake it. By just giving these little details, you make the world feel rich and the dialogue feels nice and specific and interesting. Now let's jump back to Swingers. Tip number 3, dialogue is a character taking an action. This is another reason why listening to people talk isn't going to really help you, because dialogue in a constructed story is a character taking an action to get what they want. And then the conflict comes from the other characters in the scene wanting something different, right? So if we give each character in the scene a want, that is called the scene objective, then when they try to pursue and get what they want, and they meet a character that wants something different, that is going to create the conflict, which is going to make the scene exciting. You've probably heard before, every scene should have conflict. And this is a great idea, but unfortunately I think it gives people the wrong idea. If we really think of conflict in the definition we usually see it as, then we can imagine that if we have to insert conflict in every single scene, then everybody's going to be yelling at each other and throwing chairs and telling each other to F off and do all kinds of things. And that would leave a very narrow spectrum of storytelling, right? It wouldn't reflect the full spectrum of our reality, and therefore it's a flawed idea. If you take the concept of conflict and you define it very narrowly, then it becomes exciting. For instance, you can have polite conflict, right? You think about every date. Every date you've ever been on, the first date, is full of polite conflict. It's two characters, two people trying to connect and failing, wanting to connect in different ways and missing each other until they do connect. And that is conflict. It's based on the idea that the characters in the scene want different things and pursue them different ways. That's what creates the conflict. I like to go with this definition of conflict: two or more forces that want different outcomes. That is what creates conflict. To give you an example, and to build a fire, the guy just wants to not freeze. The wind wants to blow. The guy doesn't hate the wind, or maybe does, but I guess it's pretty silly to hate the wind. The wind doesn't hate the man, it just is doing its thing. But it's full of conflict because the outcomes the two forces desire are different. The scene between Jon Favreau's character and Nikki here is full of polite conflict. They don't hate each other. She's welcoming to him. She doesn't necessarily want him to run screaming. What she wants from him is for him to be authentic and to come to her authentically. And what he wants is he wants to come to her with lies. He wants to win her over and get her number using lies. Those two things are the opposite, and therefore we have a scene that is full of conflict, and yet it never is impolite. And this is why, in order to really understand dialogue, we need to break the scene down the way an actor and a director does. When an actor and a director get a script, they take the script and they break the script down into beats. They break the scene down and they will look at and decide what their scene objective is. A scene objective is what your character wants within the scene. Then they're going to look at different ways to get what they want. These are called tactics, and they're usually expressed as verbs. So, and a scene that's really vital and powerful and exciting, a character will take many different tactics to get what they want. They basically try every tactic in the book. One way you can see if your scene is broken is if your character only tries one or two tactics. A really strong character is going to try many different ways to get what they want. It can be helpful to think of the tactics as good cop, bad cop, right? Imagine a scene where a cop has to get some information out of a criminal, or their lover was going to blow up, right? They enter into the room with the intention of beating it out of the criminal. They threaten the criminal, and the criminal replies, "I am not afraid of you." The cop replies, "I'll beat you up." The criminal says, "I like pain." So the cop punches him in the face. The criminal laughs it off. Now the cop is going to lose the scene because the cop has not changed their tactics. This is why you have good cop and bad cop. So bad cop walks away, good cop comes in, offers all kinds of things to the criminal to get them what they want, maybe tricks them, maybe tries a few different tactics. This becomes a dynamic scene because the characters are trying many different tactics to get what they want. Watch this scene, which is the opening to The Social Network. So think like an actor and a director. Your character has a scene objective. They take steps to get their objective and win their objective over their opponent. And the scene becomes, in a way, a dance until one of them wins and becomes victorious. We might even end the scene with a sort of checkmate moment, a moment that shuts the story down. This character is not going to win. This is it. The scene is over.
Okay, you are probably going to be a very successful computer person. But you're going to go through life thinking that girls don't like you because you're a nerd. And I want you to know from the bottom of my heart that that won't be true. It'll be because you're an asshole.
Watch as the Mark Zuckerberg character tries many different ways to impress his girlfriend and try to get her in on his plan to get into a finals club. And watch her try to squirm her way out of the conversation. She's not comfortable. She doesn't want to be here. She doesn't want to listen to him anymore. And so she tries everything in the book to shut him down. She tries shaming him. She tries changing the subject. She tries insulting him. She tries ridiculing him. She tries going with it for a minute to see if that'll appease him. She tries all of these different things, but nothing works. He is a juggernaut. And this is a case in which he really does try one tactic, and it's still pretty great writing. Now, one thing to know about scene objectives is they don't have to be some lofty, important desire, right? A lot of times in writing, we talk about the character's desire and how it runs them, and that everything they do is to pursue this objective. If only people work that way. The real truth is nobody acts that way. We may have a super objective. That means a thing that we want that overwhelms us, that is driving the story, like, Gatsby wants Daisy, or the little girl in Little Miss Sunshine wants to be Little Miss Sunshine. That's the super objective. But the reality is even though we want that super objective, when we try to get it, our base desires are going to come up and they're going to emerge and they're going to pull us off the path of trying to get what we want. As we pursue that super objective, sometimes we just want to be right. Sometimes we want to get laid. Sometimes we want to eat. Sometimes we want to win the conversation. In this scene between our two hitmen in Pulp Fiction, it's just a scene about whether or not it's okay to give a foot massage to Marcellus Wallace's wife and not expect retribution. The men are not following their super objective. They're just following a simple desire. I want to be right. I want to win the conversation. This is real.
Would you give a guy a foot massage? Fuck you.
The fact that we are playing with a really realistic scene objective, something that feels authentic, that is base, that is just a person, being kind of a shitbag that we are. The scene feels real and true and interesting, and it's fun to play, and this is good dialogue. Now the characters are going to pursue this objective until one of them becomes victor, and this is going to be the moment in which the scene turns. It's going to create a turning point in the scene. A scene that doesn't turn basically serves no purpose and probably will end up on the DVD extras. The moment in which the scene turns is where a change is made that moves the story forward. To move the story forward is one of the great purposes of dialogue, but it's not the only purpose. In fact, great dialogue should do not one thing but three. This comes from the book The Anatomy of Story by John Truby. John Truby argues that great dialogue will do three things: communicate the plot, communicate the character, and communicate the theme. He calls this symphonic dialogue. They have funny names for everything when they write these. It's sort of how they make a name for themselves. Let's go back to our pickup scene. In this scene, The story is moved forward. Jon Favreau's character is trying to get past a lost relationship and find new love. And this is his first step of victory, where he gets a number. And it also communicates theme. Swingers is about a war between two philosophies. One of a man who wants to be authentic with women and truthful, and his friends who get a lot of women, but not in the best way possible. Good dialogue uses subtext. You've probably heard this tip before. This is one of the most common tips you're going to get, and it's a great one. However, what does it really mean? And we all know what subtext is. It's the text underneath the text. Subtext. What does subtext mean? It means the text underneath. That's a great note, but how do you do it? That's a little harder, right? When I say use subtext, what we basically mean is you can't talk about the plot directly, because that's how people act. When you have a screenplay and the character walks in the room and they ask for what they want, it just feels inauthentic, because most of us aren't like that. There are a few people who are, and kudos to them, but most of us dance around the subject. We can't address our desires head on. So while we may eventually get there and tell you the subtext, at first we're going to dance around it. Dialogue that is considered on the nose is when a character is basically coming out and saying exactly what they want, not dancing around it at all. Well, how do you do this if you can't talk about the plot of the movie? What do you talk about? This brings up another really helpful hint. Set the scene to give yourself something to work with. If you give yourself something within the setting to play with, then all of a sudden, when you can't talk about the scene, you can talk about what's in the room. You can talk about what you're doing or what's happening. This is a brilliantly written scene from Psycho. Marion Crane and Norman Bates are having a very polite conversation full of polite conflict. The subtext is not something we can talk about. No one can tell the truth here. So what do they talk about? They talk about what's in the room. Look at the birds around the room. We talk about taxidermy. You eat like a bird. He talks about what she's eating. They talk about what is right in front of them, and that leads us to the text eventually. But because the scene was set and we had things to work with, the writers had things to pull from and had things to talk about. Number 9, dramatize exposition. This comes from the book Story by Robert McKee, which is a brilliant book on writing everybody should read. What does it mean? Well, exposition is the bitter pill. It's boring. Every movie needs exposition. Some movies more than others. Something like Inception needs endless pages worth of Ariadne walking around telling us how the dreams work. And it can be very deadly boring, and most movies do it badly. Robert McKee's tip to dramatize exposition is a brilliant one. So there's 2 really good tips on how to make your exposition interesting. The first is the Pope in the pool trick. There's a scene where some boring exposition is happening, and in the background there's a Pope floating in the pool. Now, that's one way of doing it, that you're actually just going to give us something good to look at while we hear the boring exposition. This is also the sexposition trick in Game of Thrones. That's what they're doing. But a better trick is to dramatize the exposition. And the reason why this is such a powerful way of doing things is it goes back to trick number 3. Dialogue is a character taking an action to get what they want. When you dramatize exposition, what you do is you put the words in the mouth of a character that needs to tell another character the information in order to transform their behavior. Mark Zuckerberg is talking to his girlfriend all about final clubs so he can impress her with how incredible he is, because he's gonna get into a good final club. As he does this, he's giving us everything we need to know for the plot to operate. We learn about Eduardo, we learn about final clubs, we learn about how hard they are to get into, and we learn how important they are. The scene is delivered in a way that's exciting. We're watching these people have a sort of failing date and get annoyed with each other because he's taking an action to get what he wants, and we, the audience, get all the information we need in the most unique and interesting way we can get it. Similarly, look at this scene from Pulp Fiction. This is an exposition scene. It seems like a meaningless conversation between two men talking about foot massages and Big Macs, but it's not. In this scene, we are getting all the information and the exposition that we need for this part of the movie to operate. We are learning that Marcellus Wallace is a bad man. We are learning that Mia Wallace is hot. We learn that Vince is taking her out on a date. And this creates the stakes because we also know Vince and Mia are both drug addicts. And something might go down. And if it goes down, Marcellus Wallace is going to toss Vince off a building just like he did Tony Rocky Horror. But it's disguised in a scene where two men just have a dumb conversation about foot massages and both want to be right and both want to win. You hide your exposition, you dramatize it, or you give us something fancy in the background to look at so it's not so deadly boring. Because it's a bitter pill and the audience has to swallow it anyway. Last, good dialogue is imperfect, and this is one of its most glorious features. Listen to the way Norman Bates screws up the word falsity.
I hear the expression eats like a bird. It's really a falsity. Because birds really eat a tremendous lot.
Listen to the way he stammers and trips over his words. Now, in Swingers, watch how he corrects her. She calls it espresso, and he corrects her espresso. This is a key to why dialogue is such an incredible tool for a writer to use. You can create movements in the plot in a way that feels more organic than any other way with the dialogue. Because in real life and in movies, the plot changes when somebody says something stupid, something they didn't mean to say, because dialogue is imperfect. We're always messing up. We're always saying the wrong thing at the wrong time. It's happened to you, right? This is the power of dialogue. Let's watch people make some mistakes here.
Wouldn't it be better if you put her someplace?
You mean an institution?
Marion Crane kindly suggests maybe you should put her somewhere. I think this is the moment when the mother side of Norman Bates decides to kill Marion. A person says something dumb and the plot is changed. The story is changed and history is changed. This is the power of dialogue. In this next video, we're going to take one of the worst written scenes ever, but look at how it breaks all of these rules and see how you could rewrite it to make it a little better.